Hey, yo, this is Big Daddy Kane, and you're listening to another hot interview on The Library with Tim Einenkel on rapstation.com.
Veteran author and hip-hop historian Brian Coleman joins me today in The Library with Tim Einenkel on rapstation.com to discuss his latest book about hip-hop liner notes called Check the Technique, Volume 2. Brian Coleman, thank you so much for joining me in The Library.
Very nice to be here. I appreciate you having me.
I want to go to another album you talk about, which is another favorite of mine, the Coup's Steal This Album. You start out the chapter with, quote, "It's a fact. You can count on two hands the list of truly impactful and entertaining political hip-hop groups in the culture's history." It seems that since, hip-hop music, rap music, is the voice of the streets, its job is to inform fans, this seems like a very low number. Why do you think there aren't that many such impactful hip-hop groups in this vast history?
I mean, I think the Coup is a perfect example in that sometimes you just go into a different line of work. Boots was an activist. He was a community organizer, and he had talent as an MC and a producer, so he made music, but maybe he would have always just stayed as a community organizer. And so sometimes people who are more political leaning might just have talent as an MC, but might choose to do something else, or they might write poetry, or they might become a professor. And I think that's really the whole thing about any kind of music is what the options were, and kind of how things happen, and how different people combine to come into groups and recording situations. So I can't really say why. I mean, I think there are a lot. There's still a good amount, and I think the hip-hop artists and groups who are political tend to be more potent. So there's not a lot of hip-hop groups who are political who suck, whereas there are a lot of hip-hop artists who make more just BS party music or purely dance stuff, who suck. so you know what I mean? Like there's definitely less excess. Pretty much all the political hip hop groups who have ever existed have been important. There just haven't been as many. And I think that's just, it's maybe a little bit different because I have a lot of friends who are very politically conscious and active. But generally in America, the people who are activists is just a smaller part of the population. There's more people who listen to music who just want to have fun and it's entertainment and it's background than people like myself or people who listen to this podcast who are more active as fans. So to be fair, there's less of a pool in the political hip-hop, the universe to kind of pull from. But I don't know, because it's not like hip-hop is the ultimate way. Well, actually, no, I shouldn't say that. It's not the ultimate way to express yourself if you have political ideas, because you could be a writer, you could be a journalist, and a lot of the people, Public Enemy, Poor Righteous Teachers, X-Clan, the Coup, they just happen to do it with hip-hop. But honestly, any of those groups I just mentioned could have very easily never done music at all. So we're fortunate that they did, because it makes hip-hop that much more powerful and that much more diverse, and it shows the true potential of, and I think the point I was also kind of making in that Coup chapter in the introduction was, you can make political music or political statements and they can be very heavy-handed, but when you do like what Public Enemy did and X-Clan did and the Coup did, where you made it incredibly funky and musically complicated and entertaining, then that's just like the ultimate, because they could have also just been spoken word records with people just yelling at the listeners, and that you can't really listen to 60 minutes of being yelled at. But when it's presented in that way, it's just the ultimate way to kind of express political thought, because you can mobilize just so many more people when it's like that. I mean, Fight the Power what's better than that? That's possibly the ultimate expression of a political statement in music, because it's funky as hell, and the video is amazing. It was Do the Right Thing. And everything came together with that song. So when it's done well, then there's really nothing better.
Boots Riley talks about in the chapter when he's talking about the record Breathing Apparatus. He talks about how he didn't want to write after that. Did he kind of explain to you why, what was going through his mind at the time? And then, if so, what made him change his mind to continue to write?
Boots, the history of the Coup is one that has always been interesting to me, and I never knew, obviously, just like a lot of stuff, I never knew as much about the depth of it or all the real stories, but he has had to fight much harder than most artists, just in the way that labels have dealt with him. He's just had real crappy luck in his early career, and it's so dope for me to now see him doing better than ever because he stuck with it, and it was not easy. I mean, everything that could have happened to basically be like, Boots, just stop making music. This is not working for you. And he was just like, screw you. I can't. This is what I want to do. It's what I feel I'm called to do, and I do it. But I think really what happened was he, with Breathing Apparatus, after Genocide and Juice, basically the label started being Wild Pitch and EMI were kind of in having all these kind of issues with the distribution, and it was affecting the way that his group was being promoted and money that was coming to him and things like that. And I mean, it's very difficult to keep fighting when people are just pushing you around and it doesn't seem to be working. And sometimes you just say, like, okay, so is this the universe trying to tell me that I just need to maybe do something else? And I honestly think he was just worn down, and he said, I've tried so damn hard and I'm trying to do something important, and I think it's important, but everyone just seems to be kind of putting up all these roadblocks. So he was able to fall back because he was a community activist and organizer, that he said, maybe I'll just clear my head. And he didn't say that at the time. He said, forget it, I'm done. I walked away from it. In the process, as he walked away from it, E-Rock from the group was like, well, I got to take a job. Like they offered me this really dope job, and so I'm going to take it. And so then all of a sudden his second MC was gone. And so it basically ended up being a hiatus, but he was just basically very frustrated, and I don't blame him, to be honest with you. Then they came back, put out Steal This Album. Then he had all these other issues with Dog Day, with the label that they put it out on, and then it was like, oh my God! So I come out of retirement, and here we go again. And then they did Party Music, which you probably remember had the original cover was the World Trade Center being blown up. Clearly the worst luck of all time. Then that happened, so he's just constantly had to remain positive and try and do his thing, because keep in mind too, he also had a live group that he was touring with at that point and had to keep them on the road. So and Boots has never gone the easy way, and that's kind of why I think his fans appreciate it, because he's the least sellout artist there is in the music industry, and that's kind of beautiful that he's figured out a way after so many years of making a living. Now he has a great label behind him who's still an indie, but very supportive, and he's touring and making really different kind of music that still makes sense. And so he's one of my favorite success stories, because there are a lot of people who would have just thrown in the towel 10, 15 years ago, and he just kept at it, and it's worked, and he came out the other end, and he's doing great now. So
I want to switch gears a little bit. Masta Ace Incorporated, talk about the album Slaughterhouse. In it, Ace talks about the reason why he formed the group, and that seemed to be purely for financial reasons, because at the time, as he says, groups were selling more than individuals. It seems like you talk to someone today about why they don't like a certain artist, it's because they, quote unquote, are selling out because they are, they're obviously doing it for the money. When you hear a reason like this, for example, Masta Ace say this, does that kind of change your opinion slightly about the discography of Masta Ace Incorporated?
I would say it didn't change really anything to me. It was just him, because it's not like he was like, I'm joining this group with, like what the Black Eyed Peas did, and said, oh yeah, I'm really going to sell out, because there's no other way to put it. They just said, I want to make really much less interesting music and make it, for, I don't know what their actual plan is, but whatever it is, it's not really happening. So Masta Ace was very different, I think, in that he had just had a very bad experience with, he got dropped from his label, and he was a solo artist. And keep in mind, like, this group, they were all unknown. It wasn't like these were known. He was forming a super group. It was quite the opposite. He was kind of going back to being like, let me start from scratch. Let me try something new. So I would say that it didn't affect the way that I looked at him or his career. I was like, oh, I mean, why not? Why not give that a shot? It hadn't really... It's not like it didn't work as a solo artist, because clearly it did, but it was kind of just like, let's start a new era for me. Let's just try something new. And I think that it was a very unique group, clearly, and there was kind of younger people. He was established, but they were younger, and it's not like they were making pop stuff that was destined for the charts. I mean, the stuff they were making was very dark, very murky. The Slaughterhouse single is amazing, is just so underrated, because it's just so over the top and so funny, and people just didn't get it. They just really thought that was, murder, 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 kill, kill, kill. Like, they were like, oh my God, this is the most extreme group of all time. But it's like, it's Masta Ace. Like, he's not some thug, like, walking around with like an Uzi, like, just gunning down people on the street. It was obviously a joke, but not everyone got it. So anyways, I think it was a great move on Masta Ace, because he's clearly since then gone back and forth. Sometimes he does solos, sometimes he'll do a record with Ed O.G. or so it kind of, he just goes with whatever he's feeling at the moment. And I think that the group was great. I think that Slaughterhouse is as good, if not better, than Take a Look Around, which was a great record too. So if anything, it just increased his range to me and made me even more impressed.
That's something you write about. You said the album Slaughterhouse had a wide range, but was stronger because of all the bases that were covered, and iced by the fact that Ace's lyricism, whether telling stories, schooling fakers, or philosophizing about the woes in the urban environment, never faltered. But then, as you just mentioned, Ace talks about how the album was just too dark for its time. So two questions. What was when you first heard the album, what side of the coin were you on? Did you feel it was too dark at the time, or did you wrote about his lyricism? Did you have to go back to re-listen to the album for this project just to kind of see if your opinion changed?
Yeah, I mean, I always do that. I mean, earlier in the interview, we were kind of talking a little bit about, do I know all of these albums by heart? I mean, even if I do know them by heart, I go back and listen to them very carefully and kind of take them apart track by track in my own mind and figure out what I want to ask people about. I think with Slaughterhouse, I mean, I always loved the record. I never bumped it constantly. Like, it wasn't a record that I knew by heart, but I always really liked it. And I always knew a little bit about the situation, but I didn't know. I'm a huge Cold Chillin' fan, so I didn't know that he had literally just been dropped. Like, they said, no offense, there's just a certain number of sales that we're choosing who stays and who goes, and you fell just below that line, and sorry, and good luck. And clearly through no fault of his own, it was not like he did anything to deserve getting dropped. It was just the BS of the industry and the way that things sometimes go, and that sucks. So going to Jalicious Vinyl was a very dramatic move too. I've always been interested. There's a compilation that I'm sure you know called Heavy Rhyme Experience that was somewhere around that era. I think a little earlier even, and that's how they first got introduced to Masta Ace. The Brand New Heavies basically did background tracks to a bunch of amazing MCs, some of whom were affiliated with Delicious Vinyl, some who weren't. And so that's how they brought some people in. So I just think there was a lot going on. I knew there was a lot going on with that record, and I knew that it was a complicated record because clearly there was very dark, serious stuff. But I mean, still, if people haven't listened to the Slaughterhouse song, like, go back and listen to it because it's hilarious, really, because it's so extreme. It's basically the Gravediggers, before the Gravediggers, or you could at least see how Prince Paul must have just been like, "Whoa, that's awesome," like, "Whoa, I didn't even think of that," or like, "I didn't even go that far with Gravediggers," or whatever. So, and there's even stories in the chapter how he said they showed up somewhere and they thought they were like the new NWA and the new extreme kind of splatter like hip hop group, and they were just like, "What? That was a joke, that, right?" And the people did not know that it was a joke. The promoters didn't know, and they hired him to perform, and they're like, "Oh man, you're the ignorant MC's not here," and they're just like, "Wow." So yeah, I knew a little bit about the history of the record. I always liked the record, and I think the more I learned about it, the more I respected his journey as an artist, and I respected the album itself. It made me appreciate it that much more. But it's really one of the more underrated records of the 90s, I feel, and I know a lot of people do. Like, I think that's like Eminem's favorite album of all time or something like that. And so, like, people who know hip-hop love that record, but generally it was still overlooked, and I think people go back to it and they're just like, wow, this was so that a lot of times, to me, I take that journey, but I'm glad if people who read the books take the same journey, no matter what that is, any of the chapters in the book. But I kind of took that my own journey a little bit with Slaughterhouse, the album.
I want to go to another album, Cool G Rap and DJ Polo's Wanted Dead or Alive. I know you talk about Eric B getting production credit on the album, even though he seemed to have nothing to do with it. Where at least Cool G Rap says he told them to give Large Professor all the production credit. Is that common practice, where people just get production credit even if they're not really involved in the album?
I don't know if I would say that, and also I wouldn't say that Eric B had nothing to do with the record. I mean, it was under his management company. I mean, sometimes there is a gray area of, it says it's under a certain production crew and someone's mentioned as a co-producer. Maybe they did more than that, or clearly the history of ghostwriting in hip-hop goes way before anything to do with that record, and certainly gone on far after it. So I don't. It's a tough question to answer. I don't know if there's certainly there are stakes that get to be somewhat high at times about knowing about production credits and publishing and things like that people kind of sometimes learn the hard way. I think that a lot in that chapter, it was Cool G Rap and Polo both just kind of saying that it is time to give Large Professor credit. I think people generally know that he produced that, and but I wouldn't also say that Eric B had nothing to do with it. I don't think that he ever said, I produced every single track on there, and that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for me. So if you look at the credits in that record, if you look at it, are kind of complicated. Like, there's all kinds of co-production listings here and this and that. So, yeah, it definitely happens from time to time. That's not the only album that there's ever been any dispute about. Sometimes it's kind of a more minor thing, like, did they really co-produce? There was something with DJ Premier and Jeru in the Damaja chapter where Premier was like, no, like, he did not co-produce it, and Jeru feels that he did, and blah blah. So that's always going to happen. I don't think it's ever. A lot of times it's not even because they're trying to rip somebody off money-wise. It's just like, well, I put in a lot of work. So there are other instances where, like in the Diamond D chapter, Diamond D would give people co-production credit when they had nothing to do with the track except he gave me that bass line. So I gave him production credit as a co-producer, which is pretty damn generous, because just because that means that so you should, every time I'll give co-production credit to the guy who owns the record store where I bought that album, so that was kind of the opposite, where Diamond D did not have to give somebody that much credit. But he appreciated the fact that they were like, yeah, man, here's this drum loop, go ahead and use it, because clearly that's also the backbone of what he does. So that was, the guy wasn't in the studio maybe, but it's still like, yeah, Showbiz gave me that bass line, so I gave him co-production. So
it seems like he would be like that should be like the special thanks credit, line or contributors.
Everyone deals with it differently, though, and that's kind of, I think, explored in a lot of these chapters, and how people talk about what they do. With a Gangstar record, there's never any question. Like, Premier produced it. So, but most of the time, it's not quite that cut and dry.
Every day is a main event. Some old lady limps, the pushes and pimps, see shrimps. It gets tiring, the sight of a gun firing. They must desire for the sound of a siren. A bag lady dies in the alleyways. She's seen the last of her days inside the subways. One more down the slope, the kid couldn't cope, so he stole somebody's dope in a gold rope. Now my son's on the run. He's the one that had fun that was done by shotgun. Upstairs, I cover my ears and tears. The man downstairs must have drank too many beers. Cause every day of his life he beats his wife. To one night she decides to pull a butcher knife. Blind man plays the sax. A tune called The Arms on my mom's show railroad tracks. Many lives are cut short. It's when you're living in the streets of New York. Baby needs new shoes, but his papa uses all the money for booze. A young girl is undressed in the backseat of a caddy, calling some man daddy. 3 men slain inside an apartment. All you can see is the sparks when it darkens. Daylight broke, cops rolling on the scene. The drug war, daily routine. Gambler spots, just a poor man's jackpot. You win on a lot, you get shot. The drug dealing fanatics, but you don't want no static, cause they got crack addicts with automatics. Shootouts for a desire for territory. A kid got caught in the crossfire. A tired mother can't take no more. She grabbed a bottle full of sleeping pills and took about 24. Human beings are laying on the pavement, cause they're a part of the mental enslavement. The cop snipers, little babies in dirty diapers. This type of life is making you hyper. People scouting a torched out building and got killed when the cold air filled in. Is help really suggested? One more person's arrested, a child molested. A little kid says, yo, I got a color TV, CD player, and car stereo, and all I want is a capsule. I also got a 38, don't give me no hassle. One kid heads straight for the top and gets stopped and popped by crooked cop. Look behind you when you walk. That's how it is in the streets of New York.